A lot to discuss. It was a busy weekend, the UK Open. We're going to be looking back on the 3 days in Milton Keynes, and we'll start off with the champion, James Wade, back in the winner's enclosure on TV for the first time since 2018. 10 TV titles now in the PDC, 11 if you include the Jockey Wilson Cup in 2009, if anyone can remember that. But we'll come on to our first of two questions of the week, and it is, which bracket best describes James Wade in the GOAT conversation? Top 5 all-time, top 10 all-time, top 5 PDC, or none of the above?
Well, I'll take those in reverse order. I'll throw out none of the above because that just doesn't apply. And unless you're saying he's the greatest of all time or some other reason for going none of the above, I don't think that's a viewpoint that could be defended. He falls into one of those three categories. Starting with top 5 for PDC, though, Phil Taylor and Michael Van Gerwen. You can put them in either order depending on what criteria you want to use, but they're the clear top 2. And I would say Gary Anderson probably for PDC darts is number 3. But who else are you going to put ahead of James Wade? Maybe Raymond van Barneveld, but his era of dominance was very short. Maybe Dennis Priestley, but again, his era of dominance was pretty short. Adrian Lewis won 2 world titles, but hasn't won much beyond that. James Wade now for almost 15 years has been getting to televised finals, and not just, the odd one. He's averaged in the last 14 years nearly 2 a year if you include World Series events and you include the Jockey Wilson Cup, as you mentioned. I'm not going to include that one. And many of these are the biggest in the sport. He's won the World Match Play. He's lost the final there a couple times as well. He's now won 3 UK Opens, which is probably the 4th most prestigious of the events. I think I would put him for PDC darts, ahead of Raymond van Barneveld into number 4. But I could see the argument going the other way around. Top 10 all time, I think there's also a very, very strong argument for that. I wouldn't put him ahead of Raymond van Barneveld for all time, all things considered, because you have to throw in the dozen years where Raymond van Barneveld was the number 1 in the BDO, and pretty darn close to Phil Taylor in terms of overall level. That's why in his first year he was better than Phil Taylor for a year when Phil Taylor was near his best. But there's not many other people outside of the obvious names that we've gone over in the show that I would put ahead of him. The only thing missing from his CV is a world title, and that is a big thing to be missing. But he almost makes up for it with everything else he's won. I think he's top 5 PDC. I think he's top 10 all time. I'm not going to put him top 5 all time yet, but he's only 37. He has time to do it. If he can win a world title, if he can keep this going for another decade, there's a very good chance he will end up top 5 all time, because his CV will merit it if he does this for another decade.
Yeah, and we've had lots of debate on Twitter as well. This question's going to be running all week on our Twitter poll, so if you're listening to the show, go and check that out and have a vote. We've had a lot of you voting so far, and at the minute, top 10 all time is leading the way. 61% agreeing that he should be in the top 10 of all time. If you're going to have that debate, I think there's various factors that people look at with these debates, and obviously the elephant in the room is the World Championship. That is the one big title missing from James Wade's CV, and not even got to a World Championship final either. He's had 3 semi-finals, 2009, 2012, 2013, and the big one that everyone talks about is 2012, isn't it? Quarterfinals against John Part, one of the best games we've ever seen at Ali Pali. The 85 checkout he took out in the sudden death leg, John Part waiting on 40 to win the game. It is typical James Wade, that checkout. And then he goes 5-1 up against Adrian Lewis, the draft gate. Ends up losing 6-5. I think he had a match start in that game for 6-2 as well, so he could have got through to a world final against Andy Hamilton. And with all due respect to Andy Hamilton, that was his peak years. He was one of the top players in the game at the time. James Wade would have gone on favourite for that game. He would have had a tough game regardless, but if you're being offered a world final against Andy Hamilton when the other two, I think he'd have had to Phil Taylor, he would have taken that almost 10 years on now, and he is still pushing for these titles, winning these titles. You go back 2007, he won his first big one, the World Match Play, 24 years of age. He's now coming up to 40. He's had a few blips along the way, it's got to be said. There's been some defeats. There's been some times in his career when we're thinking, is this the start of the slide for James Wade? And here we are, 2021. He's now in the top 4. I'm thinking this is the first time that he's been the number 1 English ranked player in the PDC. I'm sure our listeners will let us know if that's wrong, but he's above Rob Cross now. He's in the top 4, top 10 of all time. I think there is a debate, like you say, that you could put him in there. For me, I would definitely put him in that 9 to 15 bracket. Maybe when his career's said and done, we can look back on it and say for definite if he's a top 10 player or if you're going to put him in the top 15. But there's a long way to go, I think, in James Wade's career. And we've seen that at the weekend. He's not a player that you'd say he's on the slide. His best years are behind him. If anything, he's back to playing some of his best starts. And you've got to say, if we're doing a top 5, top 10 list in terms of timing and big checkouts, James Wade is going to be in that list. And we saw it at the weekend, the 147 against Simon Whitlock, the 150 he had early on in that final against Luke Humphries. He is a player that has got that immense timing in his game, and when it is on, he is hard to beat. And we saw that at the weekend. He's got another title.